And hello to you. Welcome to the Motivation Podcast from motivateyourself.co.uk. My name is Richard Nicholls, and I'm here to guide, to teach, and to motivate you to be the best you can be. Now, I hope you've had a good summer. Having the Olympic Games in London has certainly created a noticeable upswing in positivity and optimism. Hardly surprising, though, I guess. Great Britain totally outperformed everyone's expectations, coming third in the medal table with 65 medals. And I'm quite interested as to why. So apologies if you thought that the Olympics had disappeared. I'm going to talk about it briefly now. Because before the Games started, I read an article about predicted medal counts, which was based on population. Now, obviously, countries with a larger population or higher gross domestic products with more money, they're more likely to do well. If there's only 1,000, maybe, people in the world with exceptionally high athletic ability, then the USA and China, they're probably going to have a couple of hundred great athletes each. So, based on that, we find that Great Britain, with its 62 million people, which is less than 1% of the world's population, far less than China's 20%, we should have got 32 medals, putting us 8th on the medal table, with the USA and China topping the charts with around 50 medals. Now, this was researched by a lady called Megan Boos, I think it's pronounced Boos, could be Bus, of Northwestern University, Illinois. Now, following that research, along came a man with a great radio name, Dan Johnson. You're listening to Dan Johnson. Certainly sounds like a DJ, of Colorado College, who says we also need to factor in the cultural interests of each country, amongst a couple of other things. Particularly, he was commenting on India's passion for cricket, meaning they weren't likely to fare particularly well in the athletics. Also factoring in our past Olympic record and the fact that we were the host nation, which is always going to add a bit of extra support. And it was predicted that we'd get 45 medals, which puts it as a very respectable 5th place between Germany and Australia, with the USA, China, I think Russia sitting happy at the top. Now, why am I telling you all of this, I hear you cry? And well, it's because we didn't get the 32 medals that Megan Boos's population and affluence calculations predicted us. We didn't even get the 45 medals that was predicted by Dan Johnson, that also factored in the previous record and access to sporting facilities and so on. We got 65 medals, and almost half of those were gold. We performed outstandingly. Now, I'm not telling you this because I've come over all patriotic, because I'm more interested in what enabled Team GB to perform so well. What is it that turns an average team into world-class athletes? After all, these are, by and large, the same athletes that competed 4 years ago in Beijing, with the same access to facilities and funding, despite the recession and funding probably being cut at some point. And yet we were able to get an extra 18 medals. Why? Well, the answer? Simply because they wanted to. Now, I'm sure they also wanted to do well in Beijing. The world was watching them then too. And even Britain, we were watching them in Beijing. But they really wanted to do well this time round. So that every time that little gremlin on their shoulder said, "You can't do it," they overrode it and said, "Yes, I flipping can." They pushed themselves even further. They worked even harder because they had the extra motivation, the extra desire to do well. Not just a want, but a need to perform better and better. I feel that their extra success this time is down to their psychological state, which reminded me of something about the Paralympics, which kicked off just a couple of days ago. There was some controversy at the Sydney Games in 2000. I don't know whether anybody remembers this, when the Spanish basketball team were stripped of their gold medals because they didn't have learning disabilities at all, and they weren't tested, which is probably a bigger issue than the cheating, hence why it's taken 12 years to allow Paralympians with learning disabilities to take part, but then only in swimming, athletics and table tennis, interestingly. So, what's stopping someone with learning disabilities from taking part in the Olympics rather than the Paralympics? Well, according to the Olympic Committee, if your IQ is over 70, then you have to compete in the Olympics, not the Paralympics. So why should someone's IQ make them run faster? Why should it make them swim faster or play better table tennis? Maybe it's because someone with a lower IQ is more likely to give up. And why? Well, because they've got into a habit, I think, of listening to that gremlin on their shoulder when it says, you can't do it. Because they have so much evidence in their memory banks of not being able to do something. So they develop a fear of feeling stupid, maybe. Now, most people get that, but I guess with a lower IQ, it's harder to ignore it. Interesting. And that's the same for all of the Paralympians, I guess. If they've got that gremlin in their head and they've had it for 20 years saying, everybody else outperforms you all the time, you can't do that, you can't run, you can't swim, you can't do it. If they've been telling themselves that, then it's very difficult to override that when they've got evidence there in front of them saying, yeah, my legs don't work. So all of this boils down to one thing, that we have a lot more potential than we think. I was talking about this to a client last week, and his face lit up as he realised that he could associate with this. And he was describing how in the gym, when bench pressing weights, if the instructor standing over you is to just lightly touch your fingers or your hands with their fingers and just give you some encouragement, which they tend to do, you can lift heavier weights. As if it gives you the feeling that them just touching you is adding to your strength, as if they're doing some of the lifting when they're not. It's all going on in the mind. In fact, there's been quite a few experiments testing mind over matter when it comes to physical strength. One in 2004 by the Lerner Research Institute of Cleveland, Ohio. They compared mental exercises to physical exercises in volunteers' fingers. I think it was their little fingers, having to test the strength in the little finger. And they found that a control group that did neither physical exercises to them or mental exercises, they gained no extra strength after 12 weeks. And the volunteers who were doing 15-minute finger exercises every day, they boosted their strength by 53%. And the ones doing the imaginary exercises every day, they boosted their strength by 35%. Less than the physical stuff, but hey, they did nothing. It was all going on in their mind, and yet they boosted their strength by 35%. Amazing. There was another one in 2007, a study by Bishop University in Quebec showed similar results. They split 30, whenever you get psychology tests, and you always get students in. Students are great for this sort of thing. Splitting 30 sports students into 3 different groups. One group to mentally practice exercises on a hip flexor weight machine, and a group that did it for real, and a control group is to carry on exercising as normal. Again, the control group saw no change after a period of time, but the other 2 did. The ones doing real exercises, they were able to lift an extra 28%. And the students who were just imagining the exercises, they were able to lift an extra 24%. There's not much difference between the 2 there with those muscles for some reason. What does this teach us? Well, that if you want to boost your strength, it's good to do real exercise, don't get me wrong, but simply imagining doing them is enough to wake your central nervous system up into making a genuine difference to your body. Or maybe it's that the ones doing, this is interesting, maybe it's the ones doing the real exercises eventually get that gremlin on their shoulder telling them that's as much as they can do, whereas the ones doing it in their mind, they can just keep adding heavier and heavier weights maybe, so that when they come and do it for real, there's an extra confidence boost. Maybe. Not sure. Either way, one thing we know from all of this is that the mind is very, very powerful. And if you take a bit more control over what it's doing, you can push yourself further than maybe you originally believed you could. So, if there's something in your life that you've told yourself you can't achieve, maybe it's time to imagine that you can. See where it takes you next. Right then. That's it for now. But before I go, I want to mention a couple of things, some comments that appeared on the iTunes store. Someone called Mr. Darnborough posted a brief message just saying, loving Richard Nicholls. I wanted to say thank you. And someone else calling themselves Knock It On The Head says, like him, enjoy these. So thanks to you two, and I'm glad you're enjoying the podcast. Please do get in touch with me, and I'll tell you why. Oh, I also had an email from Pauline and John, who, following last month's podcast on conformity, decided to go around telling jokes that made no sense. If you don't know why they did that, go back and listen to last month's podcast if you've not, and you'll see why. What was it? A punchline, at least the one that was quite common anyway, was no soap radio. Absolutely makes no sense at all. But people laugh. Listen to my podcast or read my newsletter on the blog, and you'll see why. So Pauline and John were doing that just to see if they can make some people laugh, and it did, and apparently got me a few new subscribers to my podcast too, once they'd explained what they were doing to their friends, so thank you very much. I must admit, the success of this podcast has really quite surprised me. I knew it was going to be popular-ish, but when I first started doing this, it was really just for the benefit of my one-to-one patients, so they could get a little bit of extra from their therapy with me. And in releasing it to the public, as I did a year or so ago, 2 years ago, I didn't expect it to become so popular. But if you look at the self-help chart in the iTunes store, I'm rarely off the number one spot in the UK. Even yesterday, when my previous podcast was a month old, it was still there at number one. It keeps jumping up and down, but 1, 2, back up to 1. Yesterday was at number one again, so thanks to everyone. It really is nice to know that I'm not just waffling away for no reason. And as a thank you, I've added the discount back to the De-Stress Yourself hypnosis program for podcast listeners. Usually my downloads £7.99 for two 30-minute hypnosis MP3s. But put in the word chill in the coupon code box. That's chill, 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 and you'll get it for just £6. So take advantage of that, and it keeps these podcasts going then, you see. Also, anyone who wants to contact me at all with something for me to talk about in my podcast gets a free download of their choice from motivateyourself.co.uk. So Pauline and John, you've had yours, I believe. And if Mr. Darnborough and Knock It On The Head and anyone else who's left a review on the iTunes store would like to get in touch, you can do that by emailing me, richard@motivateyourself.co.uk, and I'll let you have your MP3s. And anyone else who wants to buy a copy of the De-Stress Yourself MP3s, you can get it for just £6 rather than £7.99, which is cheaper than the shops, with the coupon code CHILL. So do that, and I will speak to you again next time. Ta-ra for now.